Welcome to Indiana Sports Beat Radio, presented by Endeavor Hospitality Group and Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington.
Looks over the middle, second guesses, fires, throws. Does he make the catch in the end zone? Yes! Touchdown! Oladipo to win it.
Another one! Another one!
Another
one! Huge hole! He's at the 30! He's gonna go! 10, 5, touchdown! Jonathan Taylor!
Galloway finds Rob Finnessy, who fires the three, and
He hit it!
Now, from the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios, here's your host, Jim Coyle.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Indiana Sports Beat Radio. Of course, coming to you from the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios, except for, of course, this Friday, as always, here at BB's Market. Part of the Endeavor Hospitality Wild Club. Make sure you stop by and enjoy each and every one of those places, whether it's Southern Stone or right here at BB's, where it's your butcher, baker, no matter where you live. Full assortment of everything you could ever need. Welcome aboard. Of course, also powered by Andy Moore Honda. Make sure you go to Andy Moore Honda. Get more to your door with AndyMooreHonda.com. Welcome aboard. Hello, everybody. Lots of people already hitting us up on the Andy Moore Honda hotline already. Nice to see everybody. Hello, Kevin from from Jeffersonville, John W., Fred, Jim, Harbaugh. Good morning, Vietnam. Yeah, can't scream that right now. Kim English to Providence is their head coach. FAU, oh yeah, we're going to be talking about that. How about that big win? Dusty May, Florida Atlantic knocks off Tennessee. They're in the Elite Eight. How about that? Remember we had Dusty on back during the season when they were rolling. Well, I don't know if we'll be able to get him on. Well, next week if they win, they'll be going to the Final Four, so it'll be nuts. But we'll see about that. Well, we'll definitely be having Dusty May back on. Looking forward to that. But wishing them the best of luck as they roll on. Logan Duncombe, of course, in the portal so far. We'll talk about that. And not a shock there. That's one of the players I expected to see go. Just has not had a good run of it in Indiana. Injuries, sick. And going forward, it's probably not. Indiana has to have things fixed and now. They have to have players ready to go and now. Watch if you watched the Kansas State team, you realize that's where Nigel Pack transferred from. So he left the team, went to another team. Both of them end up making the Sweet 16. Kansas State, 10 new faces on that team. 10 new faces on that team. Was it Kansas State or someone else in that league that went from like 2-22 to 22 and 2 in a season?
That was Iowa State who did that.
Okay, I knew I didn't think it was them, but I knew it was in the Big 12. But that shows you the suddenness of change in college basketball now. We saw that a little bit in football. With actually, that was Iowa. Is that Iowa State we're talking? No, but the football program also had a rapid change. So it happens, and
Kansas had a rapid football change, if that's what you're talking about. I don't know.
Maybe it was that, but
was it what's his face's first season at Kansas? Lance Leopold. I don't know if this is his first year or not.
I don't know either.
Quick turnaround, regardless.
That's the thing. You're going to see these changes or so quickly at places. Now, Michigan State is a place that they had not hit the portal, not used the portal. It's Tom Izzo, of course. He does it the other way around. But Indiana is going to have a lot of new faces next year, and they're going to need a lot of new faces because they need to do things differently. Scott, how you doing? Hit us up from Evansville. Larry, Rudy.
What kind of place do you think Logan Duncombe will end up at? I mean, I know that's anybody's guess, but I'm curious what your thoughts are.
Well, he's a big guy, so he's going to be welcomed at a lot of places. But Cincinnati.
That was my thought too, Cincinnati.
I mean, that's where he's from. So
Yep.
That would be my first thought. Then secondly, Xavier.
Yeah.
I mean, there's two easy landing spots right there because I would assume Jack Nungy, who's from Indiana, is about out of eligibility. I'm not sure what his eligibility status is. He's from Newburgh, down by Evansville, but playing at Xavier, transferred from Iowa. So but my point is, you can see a lot of new faces quickly, and Indiana needs to see some new faces quickly if you want to win quickly. I mean, it's just that simple. These days of building it up over 4 years, the Matt Painter system, it ain't going to work. You just cannot build. You can't. The 4-year thing, that's over. That's history. You cannot build over 4 years. You cannot plan over 2 years. I don't know that you can plan over a year, to be honest with you. But the 4-year system has now become a 2-year system at best. You are going to have to replenish your roster. You're going to have to replace people on your roster. Look at Indiana right now. From a fan standpoint, I promise you they did not expect certain names to leave that are going to need to leave for this team to be better. And that's just part of the reality. Logan Duncombe on that list. He is gone, so there's one opening. That gives you probably the 4 openings that you need right now. I think there's 2 more coming. Could this be one? We'll see. I put the over and under at 5.5. So we're at 4 right now. So 2 more. Does that happen? Yeah, very, very happy for Dusty May, Michael. That was a great game, man. They were behind. They had to come in the come from behind in that second half. Phillips says NCAA's put out updated transfer rules limiting transfer waivers. Now, is that regarding medical waivers or all waivers? We'll have to wait and see how it turns out for Xavier Johnson. I just find it hard to believe that his will not be approved. I would think that it certainly would be. And if not, that would put Indiana into a gigantic hole. But I expect that to be the case. And they will have their experienced point guard, which is going to be invaluable next year. I think you saw how important it is to have unbelievably talented athletic guards. Indiana has to upgrade a guard. They have to bring more in. Gabe Cups, it's going to be interesting to see how he's able to adapt, how quickly he's able to adapt, because that's going to be an importance. Can he adapt as quickly as Jalen Hood-Schifino? And keep in mind, Jalen Hood-Schifino was forced to and given the opportunity to develop quicker because of the injury to Xavier Johnson. He was given the ball, and so forced to and allowed to grow up in that situation. So there's that. Lots of comments hitting us up. Let's see. Michael's happy. Yep, happy for Dusty May. It was Iowa State last year in the Sweet 16 that went from 22-22 to 22-2, and now you've got Iowa State or Kansas State, who has 10 new faces. 10 new faces on their roster. And how about the performance? Oh, my God. How about that performance? Is it Norwell, the point guard? Unbelievable. A performance for the ages at 5'8". Was it 19 points, 20 rebounds? 20 assists. Are you crazy? It was just, he could not be stopped. They could not control that dude. He was just everywhere, making every right pass, and everyone that he got the ball to scored the ball. That was a fun game to watch. Man, he's like a piece of dynamite that just continues to go off. But what a fun game. How about those games? Incredible games to watch, period. All of them were fun games. That's the thing. You get down to this Sweet 16, things are a lot tighter. Of course, there's just less games. Maybe it's just as many good games or just less of them. But man, oh man, they were all tight and fun to watch. Hopefully we're expecting more of that today. Speaking of today on the program, Alec Lasley will join us. We'll talk to Zach Osterman from the Indy Star as well. Looking forward to talking to both of those guys. And we'll be hearing from some of the players we haven't heard from yet. We have a lot of sound that we have yet to use, so we'll get that up. Pete says hello. Hey, we've got to get the updated bracket up as well. Of course, I know that we've got another day into it right now. So that's kind of walked it up. Maybe you have to look at it before the weekend. But, man, if you're winning that thing right now, well, but except the leaders got Indiana winning it all, so they're out. We'll have to see how that goes. Jim Harbaugh says he could see Duncombe landing at Xavier. Yep. Nungy's the guy he wishes IU had recruited. Well, there's a lot of guys you wish IU would have recruited back then. Is Lander better than Bates? What are you, nuts? No, under no circumstance, under any situation. Not. Robert says Duncombe, Cincinnati, Xavier, Miami, Ohio, Dayton, Northern Kentucky, plenty of choices. Yeah, there's a lot there. Oh man, I went over to 5 lefts. That's why he's excited about next season. If we can get an infusion of athleticism, it will be very welcome. No, it's not welcome. It's necessity. Now, you got to forget about welcome. It's necessity. If Indiana does not get this, they don't compete. I mean, you saw what they did against Miami with what they had. Okay, well, they don't have that anymore. They don't have those players. They don't have Trace Jackson Davis. They're gone. So you don't have that in addition to not having the athleticism. You've got to have a great infusion of athleticism and talent at the same time. It's got to be a very, very a different style of basketball for Indiana. The Big Ten style is dead.
Break.
It's over. It's they've got to change and they've got to get into the new age, man. We'll talk more about that. Alec Lasley is going to join us, like I said. Zach Osterman will join us later as well. Plenty to get to. You're listening to Indiana Sports Beat Radio. We're coming to you from the Golf Club Eagle Point Studios mobile unit. So we're here from BB's today. Back with more Indiana Sports Beat Radio right after this.
We'll be right back to the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios for more Indiana Sports Beat Radio with Jim Coyle, presented by Endeavor Hospitality Group and Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington.
Hey, how is Alec good for 1 or 2 segments?
He'll do both.
Awesome.
I've also so Mitchell Page is getting married tomorrow. He said he might come on for some nonsense talk at 9:50.
Absolutely.
He hasn't said for sure, but he said he'll get back to me.
Too bad you don't have the happy birthday or here comes the bride music.
I mean, I guess I could. I don't know if it would get copyrighted or not, but
That's not. There's no way.
no. Well, if he comes on, then we'll come back to Here Comes the Bride or whatever it's called.
I can't believe my sounds okay.
I guess your connection's just really good. Good morning, Senior Lasley.
Good morning. How are you doing?
What the hell is that background? Do you have a green screen or something?
No, it's just blurred, slightly blurred.
Okay.
How much time till we get going here?
We just
Gotta
went
make
to
sure
break. We got about a minute 45.
All right, that should be good. I gotta get another cup of coffee, but wasn't sure how much time.
Hopefully Jim gets back on time.
Yeah, is he getting his biscuits and gravy and sausage and bacon and heart attack waiting to happen?
No, they don't have any stuff like that.
Okay. I didn't know, like, you know how they have like a cake cutting fee or something like that, or something like that.
Yeah, you'd be good.
Have a good day.
All right,
Yes.
Jimbo. You got about 30 seconds.
See, I knew that.
There you go. Mental clock. I'll go ahead and pull this back in.
Fair tying their roots in Limestone with their love of Southern eateries. With quality, local, and organic food as their main focus, Southern Stone strives to always provide their guests with an exceptional dining experience. With weekly specials, quick, attentive service, Southern Stone Restaurant provides delicious, 5-star comfort food with a Southern charm at 2-star prices. Southern Stone Restaurant is part of Endeavor Hospitality's Wow Club.
This segment is brought to you by Southern Stone Restaurant. Now back to the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios for more Indiana Sports Beat Radio with Jim Coyle, presented by Endeavor Hospitality Group and Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington.
Welcome back, Indiana Sports Beat Radio, here on this Friday, coming to you, of course, from BB's, as we always do. Alec Lasley from joining us here on this Friday. How are you, sir?
Good. How are you doing?
I cannot complain. Nobody wants to listen to it. That's for certain. I was just talking about Indiana and continuing to watch this tournament and how it is more and more evident of how out of date their style is. And it's not just them, it's the Big Ten as a whole. The Big Ten, you know, with the big guys, everybody in the post, there was all the talk about the big man this year in the Big Ten, but that didn't really equate to anything at the end of the day. And we've seen teams, how many teams that were not, I'm not going to say they were not talked about, but Florida Atlantic, I mean, they were talked about as a novelty more than anything. although we want Dusty May and the Owls to go as far as they can. I mean, how many people really thought that they were going to be a team in the final 16? Miami, people did not pick them as a team to go that far because they didn't seem to have the complete amount of talent. But sometimes athletic ability exceeds talent. And we've seen that happen in many games. And for Indiana, it's not that their guys are not athletic. They're athletic in a different way, I guess, Alec. I'm not sure if I'm explaining it correctly. It's not based on speed. And speed and athleticism is where it's not in today's game.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, unfortunately, that's been the biggest kicker for the Big Ten over theoretically, the last kind of 7 years, right? When the big shift from, two traditional big guys on the floor at once to one and hybrid forwards and stretch fours have kind of come into and made their way into college basketball. And that's the one thing that the Big Ten has just really struggled to adjust to. And that's why you see, team and year again, kind of Sweet 16 being the ceiling for the conference. Whether or not you have a 1 seed, I think a lot of people were obviously expecting Purdue to get much farther than what they did this year, and obviously bowing out in the first round. But theoretically, I thought potentially that second round would be their max, right? Especially if you don't have freshman guards to kind of offset, if you don't have senior guards or upperclassmen guards to kind of offset that traditional post play, you're going to struggle. And that's what we've seen time and time again with Big Ten teams. And unfortunately, that's kind of what you saw with Indiana as well. Now, granted, I think they just ran into a much better, much more athletic team. And a lot of that starts with perimeter athleticism. And that's where the game's trending towards. That's what it's been going to the last couple of seasons, even more heavily than before. These 6'8", 6'9", scoring, playmaking wings. And not guys who are going to, have their back to the basket, not guys who are going to be able to play out of the post. That may be part of their game, but the large portion of their game and their skill set is getting the ball in their hands, letting them create off the dribble and get into the paint and theoretically score. And unfortunately that, Indiana hasn't had that in some time, right? You probably go back to, Romeo Langford as the, true scoring wing, and that team just around him was just very bad. And he was, again, still, only about 6'5", 6'6". You get to 6'7", 6'8", 6'9" on some of these rosters. I mean, you look at Miami, right? They had some smaller guards, but Isaiah Wong, 6'5", Jordan Miller, 6'6", 6'7". Those are very, very difficult matchups for any team. And if you have multiple guys like that on the floor, that's going to be a struggle to defend. And if you don't have that on the opposite end, you're going to struggle to score when you get into the Sweet 16, when you even get into the second round. And then, unfortunately, that's just what the Big Ten hasn't really had, and probably needs to get to very soon if they want to compete on the national level again, going deep in tournament runs.
Kansas State is a team that has 10 new faces on it, and yet was able to take those 10 new faces, get them to come together and have success as they're having success right now. Indiana is going to have at least, I'm thinking at least 6 new faces is what I originally had thought. We know it's going to be 4 right now because Logan Duncan has entered the portal. We've got 3 seniors that are leaving, anticipating that Jalen Hood-Schifino will leave. So actually there's 5 new faces. So 1 to 2 more I still think are possible to hit the transfer portal off of this team.
Yeah, and even at a minimum, right? It's not just, a lot of these teams are seeing production leaving from their second unit, right? Guys who, or mid-majors who are seeing their star players leave to go up a level. Indiana's going to have to replace 4 starters, and that's something that you don't typically have to do. In addition to potentially losing, one or two key rotational pieces as well. We'll see what happens with the rest of this roster. Obviously, a long ways to go in the college basketball offseason. Really hasn't fully gotten started yet, with the tournament still ongoing, and we're going to see another influx of transfers here every week, and theoretically every day after these teams lose. But Indiana needs to go out and get high impact players, and it's very hit or miss when you can bring in guys who can come in for 1 year, even 2 years, but come in and be a high impact player immediately, whether that's as a starter, whether that's coming off the bench. Right? You're going to a new team, a new system, a new coach, new players, new surrounding. That's not easy for a lot of people to do, especially if they plan on going to this new program to kind of better their skills and better their potential for a career somewhere else. Indiana needs to do that with multiple different positions, and I think the good thing in this is there's still a lot of confidence that Xavier Johnson will be back. And so if you have a senior starting point guard who's played tons of minutes in both the ACC and the Big Ten, right, that's a very good starting point that you can go into this offseason with. Granted, we still have to wait till it's fully announced, and there's still going to be some hurdles probably that they're going to have to go through, but I think there's a lot of confidence that he will return in the fall. And so, Mike Woodson talked about it after the loss to Miami. What is this style of play going to be offensively? And he's been open about, he really doesn't know at this point. And, he has not typically had traditional big men like Trace Jackson Davis on the block, even in the NBA, right? A lot of those teams have had more spread it out, versatile forwards who can shoot the three. And so that's what he's going to go after. And I think you have to really start building this team from the backcourt up, because this new era of Indiana basketball is going to be quite different, and it needs to be. You can't stick to the same, 16 and 10, 17 and 10, 18 and 10 big guy in points and rebounds a night and force that offense through there if you're not going to have shooters and playmakers around them. That's a good complementary piece. But if you look at, a lot of the teams now this year, they are, if they do have a traditional big guy on the floor, they are surrounded by lots and lots and lots of shooters and very good playmakers. And if they're not, then they're not in the tournament. And if they're not, they're very guard and perimeter heavy. So Indiana needs to kind of revolve their offense around Xavier Johnson with the assumption that he's going to be back right at this point, and surround him with shooters and playmakers, and go out and get some bigger bodies who can defend, score at the rim, but also stretch the floor, which is, so that's a lot of things to replace and a very tall task to do with a lot of open minutes, though.
There you go. And even like Trey Galloway, he's going to be a welcome member of this team, but he's going to have to find a different type of role, I think, if they're able to kind of revamp this roster.
Yeah, I mean, look, Trey Galloway is going to be a backbone for this team. Right. Whether he's going to be there just one. Yeah, no, absolutely. But I've seen a lot of people talk about, Trey Galloway's not the answer. Trey Galloway isn't this, right? Indiana wouldn't have been where it was this past season without Trey Galloway and without how he stepped up in the second half of the season. So to insinuate anything else is pretty naive to think that he will not be and shouldn't be a significant part of that team. But at the same time, you can say that, but also say that if you're going to rely on 10, 12 points a night from Trey Galloway, that's probably not the right answer. He's going to be a very, very good complementary piece. And, I hate to always use the word glue guy because I feel like at certain points that diminishes, some of their role. But he's a guy who is going to be a defensive first player for this team, a second, third ball handler for this team, and a guy, if he continues to progress the way that he did this year, I would like to see another step up in that at least confidence to shoot the ball. Right, we saw that towards the end of last year. Finished the season shooting about 42%. Granted, only about on one made three a game. You need to get that number up if you're gonna be a consistent contributor offensively for this team. And again, we'll see what the pieces are around him, but Trey Galloway is going to be a significant part of this roster, regardless of who is on it come the fall. And they need him to be. They don't need to rely on him for double-digit scoring outputs every single game. That's just not what his role is. And if it is, then you're going to go two ways. Indiana's going to be really good because you're going to have probably 5 guys then that can be in double figures, or you're going to rely on him as a second or third scorer. And he just has not shown that ability every given night for his career, and especially this year.
And we'll talk about potential new faces on this roster, but of the ones that will be coming back, who's going to, of course, Xavier, we've already talked about him. We just talked about Trey Galloway. Then we kind of don't know everything about everybody that's coming back. Is Jordan Geronimo? There's a slight question there. I don't know that he comes back. But he's not one that he's a 50-50 guy to me. I'm like, I'm on the fence. I don't know if he stays or goes. I'll be honest with you. I think that, I'm not meaning to be harsh, but I think the coaching staff would probably not mind seeing him go if they could find a suitable replacement, because his elevation has just seemed to have plateaued. Offensively, I guess, even defensively, it's just been more of athletic ability for him. But so there's one, and there's still yet, all the 4 freshmen minus Jalen Chapino, I don't see them leaving. I think Indiana's got some solid future players in C.J. Gunn and Caleb Banks. Caleb Banks is the guy. Is he someone you can expect to see more out of next season?
Yeah, and there, like we've talked about, there's a lot of questions around a few of those guys, and the biggest thing that is going to happen with these exit interviews is going to be a lot of hard conversations, and it's going to be a lot of soul searching for guys like Jordan Geronimo and Tamar Bates, where we've seen flashes in their first couple of years, but Jordan Geronimo is getting into his 4th year of college basketball. At a point, you need to take that next step in consistency, or you're not going to be able to find those minutes that you want. And as athletic as he is, he's had mental lapses on both ends of the floor that have cost Indiana. So that's a hard conversation that's going to need to happen. And same with Tamar Bates, right? I mean, the stretch that he had finishing this year was you can't have that if you're going to be a guy playing 15 to 20 minutes a night, right? I mean, the inability to convert on the offensive end was eye-popping for a guy that was so good and so consistent for the first half of the season. So those two guys, you need to get something out of them if you're going to get them back next year. You can't go through the same circle that you've gone through the first couple of years with both of those guys if you expect to take a step up. And then if you look at the freshmen, right, I mean, I think a lot of people are excited about a guy like Caleb Banks, the potential that he has shown in his limited minutes, the energy, and I think the enthusiasm, the IQ that he plays with, and just the toughness. And that's what you need out of that wing position. That's what you need just in general, but especially what Indiana is kind of looking for. He has all those tools that you see could be a factor moving forward. I'm not sure if we're going to be able to see that next year. I think that may still take one more year before it really kind of pops for him. But the one guy that will now kind of hold a lot of those keys is Malik Renew, and stepping into that starting role, moving into that role of now you're kind of eating up a lot of those forward minutes, forward touches. You need to stay out of foul trouble. You need to get tougher in the post on both ends of the floor, and you need to be able to play consistently night in and night out. Because if he's not, then a lot of this other stuff is a moot point, because you brought him in to learn under very physical, very tough forwards and Trey Jackson Davis and Race Thompson. Now it's his time to step up, and you will see a big sophomore year jump for him. not only across the board, but I just think in maturity and toughness. And Indiana really, really needs that if they're going to take the steps that they need to take to continue this momentum, which again it's just so. You talk about momentum and building momentum in a program, right? Back-to-back NCAA tournaments, which is crazy to think, obviously, for an Indiana program that's been so rich with history, but over the last decade hasn't. But at the same time, it was another double-digit loss in the NCAA tournament, and it was another game where, at least against Miami, where they looked just completely and entirely outmatched on almost every single position. And that's a very difficult thing when now you think about you are losing 4 starters and you're losing a Big Ten Defensive Player of the Year, National Player of the Year finalist, and a Big Ten Freshman of the Year who's probably going to be a lottery pick. And you were outmatched in every single position on the floor that night. And that's a difficult thought to think of now, trying to keep that momentum and building it. When you look at that, and now you look at replacing that, and there's still a lot of questions that Mike Woodson needs to answer of where we're going, who's going to step up, and what style of play this team is really going to be utilizing moving forward.
And that's exactly what we'll talk about when we come back. Who are some of the potential new faces, the new styles that they'll need, the positions they'll have to fill, offensive rebounding, defense. They have got to see some guys that can do that next year. We'll talk about that and more with Alec Lasley when we come back to the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios mobile unit, as we're coming to you from BB's as we do on the Fridays. Brought to you by Go Team for those on the go. Healthy, fresh snacks, always hard to come by. Go Team has all that and more with fresh protein powder in each bite and great flavors. You can pick them up here at BB's or just go to GoTeamBites.com. Back with more Alec Lasley and Indiana Sports Beat Radio right after this.
We'll be right back to the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios for more Indiana Sports Beat Radio with Jim Coyle, presented by Endeavor Hospitality Group and Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington.
Golfers, here's the deal.
Where do you go? Where Alec go?
He might have just stepped out to get some coffee or use the bathroom or something.
Florida Atlantic? Yeah. Texas, maybe? No, I forgot. Who does Florida Atlantic play next, Alec?
Kansas State.
Yeah.
Kansas State. That's going to be a...
Guys, can you imagine the
That's gonna be
job offers Dusty May will have if he makes the Final Four? He'll already have some good job offers, but imagine if he makes the Final Four. Is he the leading? I hear he's one of the leading candidates to take the Penn State job.
Really?
Yeah, I've heard that. Yeah, I've heard that as well. I don't know. Well,
I don't know that you take that job. That's Death Valley, man. Do you take that, Alec, even though it's a jump to the Big Ten? He's in Boca Raton, Florida, man.
Yeah, like I'm not totally. I wish Micah stayed there. I understand why he left, but I don't know if I would take that.
Well, I don't know why he left for Notre Dame. He left for one graveyard for.
I know, that's what I said. I'm like, it seems like it's not even really a step up, in my opinion, going from Penn State.
It is.
Yeah, but I think a lot of it, right? Whatever you want to say, the hometown poll, even though it's not right in his backyard, but I think a lot of it has to do with, really, in my opinion, his style of play. ACC is much more built for what he wants to recruit for. You saw his Penn State teams of, athletic forwards, versatile forwards, really guard heavy offenses. That's what you're seeing in the Big Ten or in the ACC. A lot easier to recruit for that. And you know, as prestigious as Penn State is, right, the alumni base, Notre Dame has a much different pull just all around in my opinion.
But they won't
when
have
you think of that.
any NIL money.
Well, and it's funny. I think I saw something about how Notre Dame, the university, came out and kind of spoke against NIL a little bit.
They were on
Here
like
we go,
the
guys.
Today Show
Here
or
we go.
something.
Gourmet sandwiches, entrees, a coffee bar, bread, pastries, all made fresh and mouthwatering. Stop by Feast, Market, and Cellar today.
This segment is brought to you by Remax Advanced Realty, Indie Home Pros team by Cheryl Sizemore. Now back to the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios for more Indiana Sports Beat Radio with Jim Coyle, presented by Endeavor Hospitality Group and Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington.
Welcome back. Indiana Sports Beat Radio here on this Friday, of course, coming to you from the Golf Club Eagle Point Studios mobile unit here at BB's Market, as we do each and every Friday when we're in town, which unexpectedly we are this weekend. Definitely a weekend I did not expect to be in town, Alec, not just for one side, but for either. Still shocked at the loss of the IU women to Miami. That was a shocker, but there's been plenty of those in this tournament and these tournaments, because we see teams play like they hadn't played all year, or we're like, wow, where did that come from? Or you look at a team like Kansas State, who has 10 new faces, like I said, but yet they've come together in a single season and are having success. But they've got a lot of athletic guys on there. They've got athletic guards. Indiana has got to make a move in that direction. Not that they don't have some of that in place already. They do. Caleb Banks, CJ Gunn, those young guys are all athletic guys, but it's got to cover every position, man. It is crazy. And we'll talk about that as well. Before we get to that, Micah Shrewsbury, of course, makes the move from Penn State to Notre Dame. And I think Notre Dame was on the Today Show complaining about NIL, and I'm like, well, that's not going to. Micah Shrewsbury's not going to help himself with any NIL situations going to Notre Dame, because that's not their deal. While it is virtually impossible to recruit to Penn State with NIL, they don't hardly offer that at Notre Dame.
Yeah, and what we were kind of talking about in the break there, I think this is more of a obviously going home back to his home state. Is something that is going to be difficult to pass up for anyone, especially if you talk about just Notre Dame in general. Even if they have not been on the upper level of college basketball here in the last couple of seasons, but let's not forget 7-8 years ago, right? They were consistently a Sweet 16, consistently Elite 8 team in what Mike Bray had built. So they're not. It's not like you can't get talent to go there. We know the talent, just not only in the state of Indiana, especially in the future classes here coming up, but they also have some good connections to prep schools and everything else like that as well. So I mean, I think this is more of just a stylistic coach who wants to go to a conference that fits kind of what he wants to recruit for. He was one of the few coaches here in the Big Ten that played a style that I thought could advance deep into the NCAA tournament. Granted, they were going to live and die on the three ball, but a lot of really, really talented teams do live and die on the three. And you saw North Carolina last year and the run that they made, right? Obviously did not work this year, but Texas, again, they play a hard-nosed style of defense, but they also shoot a lot of threes, and they have a lot of good guards who can make threes. You look around college basketball right now, and especially comparing the ACC and the Big Ten, the biggest difference is style of play, right? They both consistently, I would say, have roughly the same amount of teams that go into the NCAA tournament every single season outside of this year. But here we are, right, with both Miami and Michigan State as being the lone ACC and Big Ten schools at the same round. And now if Miami advances, ACC is going to have one more team than the Big Ten will in the Elite Eight. And at the end of the day, yes, getting into the NCAA tournament matters, but in my eyes, it's who can get to the second weekend and beyond. And the Big Ten has not shown to do that consistently with teams, 5, 6, 7, 8 that get in every single year. The ACC has been able to do that where they dominate Sweet 16s. I think it was a couple years ago where they had 4 or 5 teams from the ACC in the Sweet 16 alone. So style of play is a huge aspect in this move, in my opinion, and being able to recruit guys who want to play that style. It's very difficult to go to the Big Ten consistently. And we've seen not only the refs and the officiating across all of college basketball, which I think is, the amount of missed calls and whatever, we can go into that another day, has gone up dramatically. But if you look at in just the Big Ten, right, who would want to play in that league? It's not a fun up and down style of basketball. It's a slow, grinded out for the most part, bang on the bodies in the post, have guards get mauled driving into the paint, and it's just not a fun, appealing style of basketball. So a lot of guys are just, when they look at that and they have the chance to either go there or go to a very guard perimeter heavy conference in the ACC, I think there's just going to be a lot more appeal for that, especially the way that Micah Shrewsbury really, really wants to run his offense. And that's get a lot of shooters around one, not even traditional big guy, but one defensive, tough big man, shoot a lot of threes, get the ball in your best player's hands, which is going to be, either your point guard or your shooting guard, and let him get into the paint. And you're going to see that a lot more in the ACC than you will in the Big Ten.
Speaking of some names in Indiana, has been looking at a lot of them that are out there now in the portal. I know that there's a guy from Wyoming, there's a guy from here, there's a guy from, but it's the thing that cracks me up is how many of these guys, and it's a lot of them, probably most of them, come from schools that are not big time power schools. Like I said, Wyoming, you're like, so Wyoming is where the guy is coming from, that it's going to be the savior, but sometimes that is the case. And it's just funny how these guys either mature, have slipped through the cracks, whatever the case may be.
Yeah, and I mean, in that case, from Wyoming, Graham Ike, the Indiana fans should be at least knowledgeable of him a little bit, and the name should sound familiar, right, of last year's first 4 game. Really, really talented forward, long, athletic kind of player. Very similar in build to Trace Jackson Davis. Very similar style of play to Trace Jackson Davis as well. A guy who can kind of get the ball and go a little bit off of a defensive rebound, like Trace Jackson Davis showed this year. But he missed all of this season with a foot injury, so still has 3 years of eligibility left. It's a guy who averaged 19-9. Almost 19-10 last year when he was healthy, and was a big backbone for Wyoming's success in his 2 seasons there before obviously hitting the portal this offseason. So, is he going to solve all the issues if he's a guy that Indiana continues to pursue? No, but is he a good starting point in that front court where you are going to need more depth? Absolutely. Having someone like him with Malik Renew, it would be interesting to see how those two would really mesh. Neither of those guys have shown much of an ability to hit from the outside, and I think a lot of fans have seen now what that offense would look like, especially if you don't get more shooters on the floor. So if they're not able to bring in 2 knockdown shooters and 2 guys who can create off of the dribble as well to go with that kind of pair, that's going to be difficult to watch again when you consider what they just went with Trace Jackson Davis and Race Thompson for the past couple of seasons, where you weren't getting any consistent touches on the perimeter and versatility out on the wing like that. So a couple other guys that they have been looking at, which I think is more of the route that they should be going. Jamison Battle from Minnesota. Obviously a guy who Indiana fans know a lot about. Struggled a little bit this year. I think a lot of that was more so the talent around him and the talent that Minnesota had with a lot of season-ending injuries early in the season. He's a guy who can create off the dribble, but he's he's also a very good standstill shooter. 6'7", has very good size, but shot about 37% from three last season as a junior on 2.5 made threes a game. So he's a high volume guy. He's attempted over 7 threes per game in his career. So he's a guy who's going to not be shy with taking the outside shot, and that's what Indiana needs. And at times Miller Kopp was a little bit hesitant, or at least it seemed like he was, to take some of those shots from
lean in 30-footer he decided to take against Miami. I'm still trying to figure out what the hell was that. That'll never leave my mind. That was just the oddest thing. Not to interrupt you, but boy, that just jumps out. What are some of the other names that Indiana is looking at and has a shot at? But I know it's hard to tell. That's looking at and has a shot at are two different things. They got a shot at anybody, but you've got so much that is involved now with NIL. Who's bringing a better package? Is there a John Ruiz out there, from Miami trying to sneak into the deal? From an NIL standpoint, Indiana should be in great standing. They should be able to offer things to guys to come in without any problem. But that's going to be a part of this. But choosing the right guys is just critical to this for Indiana to make a move to be better next season.
Yeah, absolutely. And, the two guys that Indiana is kind of most involved with at this point, again, as we're sitting here March 24th, with a lot of the transfer portal to go, a lot of the offseason to go, and still a lot of questions to tackle. But Nick Timberlake, 6'4" guard from Towson, and then Chris Ledlum, 6'6", 6'7" forward from Harvard. Those are the top two at this moment. Timberlake's already had a couple in-home visits with North Carolina, Ohio State, getting looked at by Kansas and some other schools as well. Indiana is looking to get out there. I believe they have an in-home visit coming up here in the next few days, as with Chris Ledlum. So those are two guys where Timberlake is a very much of a shooter. Shot about 42% from three last season on nearly 3 made threes a game. So again, another guy who's going to be a high volume shooter, career 38% shooter from three. So a guy that you can come in, he can create off of the dribble. He can be a standstill shooter as well, but a guy who moves very well without the ball. And that's one thing that Indiana really struggled with in the past two systems, the past two seasons in Mike Woodson's system of having an off-ball guard moving without the ball. And that's I think the biggest area that Nick Timberlake would bring in, and being an asset immediately. A guy like Chris Ledlum, not a huge shooter, does take about 4 threes a game, at least last year for Harvard. Was only about a 29-30% shooter though, but he's a very physical, tough, kind of hybrid forward who very much kind of, I think, plays very similar to Donta Scott at times at Maryland, a guy who can go off of the dribble and get into the paint. And the best part about his game, in my opinion, is his cutting ability off the ball, his ability to get into the paint as a slasher at 6'6", at 6'7", I think is something that Indiana has really struggled with. And again, if we're looking at what Indiana needs, they need 4 or 5 different bodies to come in. So just because they're going after a guy who, is shooting 29-30% from three, doesn't mean that they're not looking outwardly for other shooters, doesn't mean that they're not going to get other shooters, but you need multiple different positions and you need to fill those positions. So if a guy like Chris Ledlum can fill that position, which he can, you're going to go and get him, because not everyone on the floor needs to be, a high volume, high efficient shooter. I think it's more the fact that he does look to take the three about twice as much as Race Thompson, and they shoot about the same percentage. So, just if you have that versatility in your front court and at that hybrid position, I think is something that Indiana needs just to continue to put as many threats and players on the offensive end at any given moment.
I wonder if Chris Ledlum of Harvard can get into Indiana.
Maybe a tough one for him.
Yeah. What about Ja'Kai Newton and Gabe Cupps? They're the two that are coming in, the recruits, but you're freshmen, so you cannot rely on freshmen. We hear a lot about Gabe Cupps, but is he good enough to start in the first year and make an impact?
In my opinion, no. And again, I don't think you want to. He's a much different player than Jalen Hood-Schifino is or was, right? 'Cause, with the assumption that he's going to leave, he's not going to be a Big Ten Freshman of the Year caliber player.
We're
That's
talking more like Braden Smith, Fletcher Lawyer.
yeah, and again, that's difficult to get right every single year. Even the Dukes and the Kansases and the Kentuckys who bring in top notch freshmen every single year, their freshmen aren't winning it every single season. So there comes a point where it is okay to have some of these guys develop for 1 or 2 years and then be those really really tough junior senior guards that end up winning national championships and getting to Sweet 16s and moving teams and advancing them in the tournament. But he's a guy who will have a role on the team as a freshman because of his toughness and his passing and his overall just floor general skills. But he's not a guy that Indiana at this point should be relying on as 25-minute per game, 8+ points and 3 assists kind of guy. That's just not what he's going to be as a freshman. But he's going to be a very, very, very darn good player in a couple seasons in Bloomington and a fan favorite for a lot of people.
We could carry on this conversation for a while, but Alec's got to get going. We'll let you go, brother. I appreciate you. We'll talk at you again later, and go out and have a great day. Have a great weekend.
I appreciate it. You too. Talk to you guys soon.
Alec Lasley joining us here on Indiana Sports Beat Radio. We've got lots more coming up. Zach Osterman from the Indy Star will join us. We'll talk about where Indiana goes next in his eyes as well, and everything else that's going on. We're coming to you from the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios mobile unit here at BB's, brought to you by our good friends from Barber Pop Real Estate Services. For those of you down in the Louisville, Southern Indiana area, Floyd, Clark, Harrison, Scott counties, all down through there, Barber Pop has served those communities for over 3 decades. No one can get you in the home you want quicker, less expensive than Barber Pop. Reach out to her, Barbara, at barberpop.com, or our friend Matt Lincoln, Matt at barberpop.com. Back with more Indiana Sports Beat Radio right after this.
We'll be right back to the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios for more Indiana Sports Beat Radio with Jim Coyle, presented by Endeavor Hospitality Group and Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington.
Andy Moore.
Everybody seems to be pretty in the shooting.
Except for Indiana.
Yeah.
Did I just lose Jim? I think Jimbo got disconnected.
Please leave.
I wonder if Jim even knows he's disconnected, guys. What do y'all think? Excuse me.
Fresh Fork takes care of all the planning, shopping, and prepping and can even deliver them to your doorstep once a week. That's right, it's the fastest, simplest, and easiest way to avoid decision fatigue. You pick your plan and pick up at BB's Market with no extra charge. So leave the heavy lifting to us and enjoy healthy eating with stocked meals in your fridge. Order online today at thefreshfork.com. Fresh Fork is a proud partner of WOW Network. This segment is brought to you by Courtroom Sports Grill in Bedford. Now back to the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios for more Indiana Sports Beat Radio with Jim Coyle, presented by Endeavor Hospitality Group and Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington.
Welcome back, Indiana Sports Beat Radio. Zach Osterman is going to join us shortly. I'm sure Jim Coyle will be back with us as well. Looks like Zach Osterman from the Indy Star is getting logged on, so let's go ahead and bring him in. Zach, you hear me?
I can hear you.
Welcome, Zach. Kind of running the ship right now as Jim tries to get things reconnected. Obviously, we're going to talk a little Indiana basketball. Both the men and the women's seasons ended a little prematurely, especially the women's side of things. What are kind of your overall thoughts on? I guess we'll just start with the men's team losing in the round of 32 to Miami last week.
Yeah, I mean, you know what I said to somebody was if you thought Indiana was going to lose that game, you probably thought they were going to lose it for the reasons that they did. You know, teams that have been consistently quicker and in key spots more athletic and certainly more able to spread Indiana out with shooting and scoring from a lot of different spots on the floor have given Indiana trouble, and not just the Kansases and the Arizonas, but the Iowas, the Penn States, and Miami. Miami kind of did that. I think, was Indiana quite where it needed to be mentally? You saw Mike Woodson maybe on the sideline a little frustrated, feeling like his team didn't quite have the energy it needed. That might be true to some extent. I would also argue, and I've said this, when people have said, I don't think, they've said to me, oh, I don't know if Indiana was playing as hard as Miami in that game. I'm not sure how hard Indiana was or wasn't playing. I think that it looked like Miami was playing harder because Miami was just playing faster. And again, these are, these are things that are just, we knew Indiana struggled with some of these issues. We knew that Indiana struggled with teams that could, that were genuinely quicker than them at, most spots on the floor. Obviously, we knew Indiana, kind of struggled in the absence of Xavier Johnson. And some things really got pared down in terms of maybe options Indiana had as the season went on because they didn't have Xavier Johnson. And that Miami game just felt like kind of the natural sort of end point of Indiana not being able to overcome some of those challenges.
Hey guys, just joining you. I didn't understand picked up kind of what you were talking about there. But we were talking about Alec earlier, and a lot of changes coming, Alec, next year. As we continue to watch this tournament play out, it's kind of a different tournament than we've seen before. Different names continue to make it to the top. Different names continue to win. That we've seen that happen before in smaller batches, but it's becoming more of the norm and not the exception.
Yeah, I mean, probably to some extent. I think, there's the portal, and I think the COVID year in particular are really evening. I don't want to say evening some things out. I don't know if that's quite the right phrase because I mean, we're still talking about, Gonzaga, UCLA was last night. There's still some big teams left, but I do think that, when you have a team like an FAU or you have a team like a Kansas State, which I think Kansas State's entire starting lineup didn't start its career at Kansas State.
10 new faces on there.
Guys had come in. I don't think they all came in last offseason, but guys had come in at different times. And I think that, again, the portal is a piece of that. I think the COVID year is also a piece of that because it changes the way that guys think about their careers, and it changes the way that coaches can manage, can look at a guy and say, well, we can have a 5th-year guy or a 6th-year guy. I mean, Indiana benefited from that. Indiana took Miller Kopp knowing that they were getting 2 years of Miller Kopp, and they may well get 3 years of Xavier Johnson if he gets his
appeal.
And so it's just kind of one of those things where I think some of this will even out in time. Because I think COVID year is a bigger piece of this than people realize, but it is making, for I think some situations, even teams that aren't still in the tournament, but maybe performed above what we thought. Smaller teams, again, a situation where suddenly maybe a smaller team's got more experience. Maybe it picked up a transfer that kind of got cast off a bigger program, because that program wanted to move on for numbers purposes, but that guy still had years because of COVID. And so for the moment, I think at least, and we'll see if this continues, in the sort of broad, undefined future. But for the moment, I do think college basketball is kind of going through some of this because it has a weird sort of ripple in the eligibility calendar, if we want to call it that, that's changing some things.
As far as Indiana right now, they've got guys like Malik and I'm going to count Xavier. Xavier, Caleb, and CJ. 3 of the 4 freshmen are coming back. We expect all back, but those are the type of guys that are going to be needed, and Indiana's going to have to cycle through this. How quickly do you think that they can cycle in through the portal? Because this is it's new to everybody, but it's even newer to Mike Woodson because he's just still new to the college game. I know he's through 2 years of this, and it probably doesn't take that long to get used to the portal, but Indiana has not hit home runs in the portal just yet.
Well, I don't know if they haven't hit. I mean, Xavier Johnson's a pretty good portal pickup. I mean, he had the third most assists in a single season in Indiana history in 2022. I mean, listen, I don't think anybody's got a perfect formula for the portal. I think that and really, I think it's less about the portal and it's more just about the more fundamental idea of how do you do transfers. We weren't calling it the portal era yet when Terry Morin was making really solid use of transfers like Alec Batberg and Brenna Wise and finding, Nicole Cardano-Hillary, finding players that really just sort of fit needs she had, fit her locker room culture, fit her playing and coaching style. And we were just saying, well, gee, Terry has, some real success with transfers. We weren't calling it the portal era yet when that kind of really took shape. And I think it's more just about, can you build a healthy structure around it? And there are people who say that, Mike Woodson has an advantage because he was in the NBA. And that's probably true to some extent, that the idea of, free agency and, almost just sort of the understanding that, like, nothing is really forever, and obviously nothing's forever in college. But according to the old way of thinking in college, you would recruit a kid, you'd sign him, and you'd think, okay, he's mine for the next 4 to 5 years. So I'm planning this in cycles, and this is where he's going to fit at this point, and then this point, and then this point. The NBA, it is a lot more sort of like, well, there's going to be a core group that we think will be around for a while, but we're going to have to build around that group. Some of that's going to be through the draft. So that's going to be young players that aren't going to be the fully finished product. We're going to need to develop them. We're going to need to identify them and figure out that they have the right skills and the right temperament. And then we're going to need to bring them along once we get them. Some of that's going to be through free agency. We're going to go sign guys that are, maybe on 1-2 year deals and hope they come in and prove something. So there's a world where I think Mike Woodson is more comfortable, just operating in that way. But I just think it's about, can you be aggressive? Can you really like kind of give guys a sense of what you need from them and how they'll fit. And then there's other factors too. Indiana's position in NIL, I think, is going to help them in the portal. I think I'm confident in saying there are comfortably 7 figures worth of NIL earnings on Indiana's current, let's say, outgoing roster, the roster that is about to turn over. My understanding from talking to people outside Indiana, outside, frankly, the Big Ten, but just maybe more knowledgeable about NIL more widely, is that Indiana probably has one of the better NIL setups in the country in terms of resources and opportunities on the men's basketball side. And that makes a big difference when you are going to a guy that's maybe got 2 years left and, he's getting called by, he's narrowing it down to 5, 6, 7 high major programs. And he's telling you, he likes what you're talking about. And he just wants to know that he's going to have the opportunities that maybe are going to make the most of those last couple of years. That makes a difference too. And so there's just a lot of factors that go into it. And I think Indiana's probably pretty well positioned to be aggressive in the portal, but you got to go make the most of it. And that's just the way it is.
Absolutely. And are Indiana fans going to have to get used to, instead of, the guys that they've been used to seeing, players that are potentially just going to be 1 to 2 year max as being the quote unquote stars of their future teams?
I mean, that's possible. I think that certainly at very least it's going to be a blend. I think there's just an extent to which you are going to have to be comfortable in modern college basketball with a blend of these two things. And if you can, in the same way that for a long time we've said you got to be comfortable with if you want to operate at an elite level, you got to be comfortable with the fact that sometimes you're going to have teams built around guys that only be there for a year. Because they go to the draft. I mean, I'm talking about like one and done high school recruits. That's just part of it, I think. And ultimately it's like anything else. You got to get your evals right. You got to build strong relationships. You've got to be consistent with your values and everything. And I think that Indiana, again, if you look at like this roster, for example, let's assume Xavier Johnson gets his year back. There's, I think, a pretty good chance that Indiana's starting at least a couple transfers next year. But then Indiana's also probably starting Malik Renew, who was a high school recruit that was, brought in and developed and, kind of, positioned as, I don't say the heir apparent to Trace Jackson Davis, because I think he's a different player and I think Indiana's going to use him different ways, but certainly sort of the next key post player. You wouldn't have to work very hard to convince me, obviously, that Drake Galloway's still in the starting lineup. You wouldn't even necessarily have to work very hard to convince me that maybe like a player like Caleb Banks could make a jump and land in the starting lineup. And so my point is, it's it's always going to be part of it, and people have to be comfortable with it. For a coach, you've just got to make sure you get your balance right, and that ultimately, like I said, your evals and your needs meet what you are doing, meet what you're looking for from a culture perspective as well as a skills perspective.
And as Mike Woodson has come into this, it's changed as he's gotten here. So it's probably an advantage for him to have come in from the NBA and it been one way for 2 or 3 years and then changed. It changed kind of as he got here, which has probably been a big help for him because it's closer to the NBA setup now as far as getting players. But does this allow him to make quicker changes and get this program into the shape that he wants to see it in, his style, as opposed to now having to play guys that are kind of, I don't want to use the word leftover, but have come from the previous regime, and it's just he seems to have been forced to play a style that is not one that he wants.
Yeah, I mean, he's said at times, and I think we sometimes heard this, and because we were sort of talking about the immediacy of, or writing about how great Trayce Jackson-Davis was tonight or something like that, we'd hear it, but we wouldn't really process it maybe. But I mean, he said it again after the Miami game that, he's never really built a team around he has never really built a team around a high usage post player like Trayce Jackson-Davis, around a center like Trayce Jackson-Davis. And I think that's interesting because, again, we're talking about a coach who, if you look at his time in the NBA, and I wrote this week, lots of people want to think about Mike Woodson through the lens of what he did with the Knicks. I think when you're talking about what he's going to need to do at the college level, I think it's a lot more relevant to talk about what he did with the Hawks, because he built that team up from scratch. And that team was long, rangy, athletic, interchangeable. That team by its peak had lineups that included Joe Johnson, Josh Smith, Josh Childress, Al Horford, Marvin Williams, Mario West, Mo Evans, players that were somewhere between 6'6" and 6'9", with plus wingspans that could play 3, if not 4 different positions on the floor at any given time. It was the sort of thing that Woodson saw Larry Brown do with the Pistons, and Woodson never really had a high usage center in Atlanta. Al Horford was basically his best center, and Horford is obviously not a center. He's a stretch 4. He's a power forward. And I was thinking about this while I was writing yesterday, because I grew up a Hawks fan, so I was kind of digging back into the recesses of my mind for some of this. The most high-profile center I can remember Mike Woodson pursuing when he was in Atlanta was Stromile Swift, who went to LSU, who was, I think, 6'9" with a 7-foot wingspan. He was a shot blocker, rebounder, rim runner, screen setter. Woodson never built a team that ran its offense through the post. And I think he did that the last 2 years because he recognized how good Trayce Jackson-Davis was. And to be fair to Woodson and Trayce Jackson-Davis, both Trayce Jackson-Davis became such a remarkably adept player at it that it stopped just being sort of the normal stodgy old post offense and started being something that could be very dynamic because of Jackson-Davis' ability to take the ball at the key and drive, because of his ability to pass and skip and beat the double team. But I don't think that's something Mike Woodson will do again, to be honest with you. And so, while I'm not saying Mike Woodson walked into his office, Monday morning or Tuesday morning, because I think they didn't leave Albany until Monday morning. I'm not saying he walked into his office Tuesday morning and said, "I'm finally free. I can do what I want." I think he's going to miss Trayce Jackson-Davis tremendously. But there's kind of been this discussion of Indiana's losing all this production, and people give you the numbers, the points, the rebounds, the minutes played, the usage, the usage percentage, and things like that. And they say, well, how are you going to replace all that? And the answer is, I think Indiana is going to replace it by doing something completely different. I think that people who see that, they need to break themselves of the old mold that says basically the system as it's currently constituted is what's going to be there again next year. And Indiana's got to figure out a way to put a whole bunch of new players into those roles and get the same sort of production out of those players. I think Indiana's going to do something, or try to do something anyway, very, very different structurally. And I'm not saying it's going to work. Are they going to make the tournament? We'll see. They've got a lot of work to do in the portal, certainly. But I think that just broadly speaking, Indiana it's impossible for me to sit here and say how good Indiana is going to be next year, not just because the personnel is an incomplete sort of canvas right now, but also because I don't think Indiana is going to play very much at all the way next year, the way it has played the last 2 years.
I agree very much so. So what up is next for you now with both teams out of the tournament? I'm still the women losing was still such a shocker and such a disappointment. You try not to involve yourself emotionally, but man, it is really hard to not feel for that women's team just because you know how good they were, and I really wanted to see them play at that level on that level because I know how good that they really are. And man, they just ran into the wrong matchup on the wrong day, and it just gosh, you hate to see a team like that go down that you're not going to ever get to see play again. Not that team.
Yeah, I mean, and it's I said this on our podcast this week. For better or worse, wherever you fall on Bob Knight skews everything around here. And I think one of the ways, I've thought this for a long time, one of the ways that he does is most coaches, even coaches that realize remarkable success, don't win a national title with their first great team. And I know that Indiana was in the Elite Eight a couple of years ago. I know they've had a number of successful seasons. I think we can say fairly that this group was at a different level. This was the group that finally sort of ascended to. They are among the elite teams in the country. They are among in a sport that bends toward that kind of dominance. They are one of the dominant teams in the country. And I know they will have, certainly been disappointed with the way the season ended. I get that. But the reality is, most coaches don't just sort of, Bob Knight was in a Final Four, I think, in his second year, and he won a national title within 5. Most coaches don't do that. Even the great ones. It took Krzyzewski, I think close to, was it more than 10 years? I don't remember when Krzyzewski got to Duke, but it was the early 80s. He didn't win with the early 90s. Obviously, Roy Williams, it took him forever. And then by the end of his career, he was off and running. You can see that in women's basketball. There are some all-time great coaches in women's basketball that needed to wait at least a little while to win the first one. And then, it really kind of took off, obviously, once that got started. If you look at, I'm looking at Dawn Staley. Dawn Staley was at Temple for 8 years, never made it further than the second round of the NCAA tournament. He was at South Carolina for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years before she made a Final Four, and 9 years before she won a national championship. But guess what? She's won another national championship since then, and she's obviously favored. They're favored to win one this year. So it's disappointing in the here and now, and I know, everyone will have wanted more for Grace Berger in particular in her last year. But once again, you talk about culture, you talk about just learned habits and whatever else. The last 7-8 years, Terry Morin has just been steadily building toward this, and there's no reason right now to feel like that's, the trajectory of this program is going to change substantially.
Absolutely. What's up next for you now with both of these programs? They're over. I know that you've got the transfer portal that is very, very active since it is open, and the tournament is still continuing.
Yeah, I think. It's probably primarily it's going to be the portal. It's going to be the, it's going to be just again, I mean, I find it sort of fascinating to think about, to try and chart the course of essentially how this team gets rebuilt, because in the past we would have said there is so much sort of turnover, there's so much going on, there's so much going out the door that a program like Indiana can't possibly sustain. But now, because of the portal and just because of the culture of college basketball, that it's possible for Kansas State in the first year under a new head coach, with a lot of players that have come into Kansas State in the last 2 or 3 years as transfers, to build up quickly and go on and become a really good team. If, again, you get your evals right, you get your sort of your culture right, and you make the right decisions once you get your players around how to best use them. There's no reason that Indiana can't be good again next season. But what's going to be fascinating is watching Mike Woodson go through the process of building that up. When, again, there's nothing, and I'm not, like, I keep saying this and hoping people don't think I'm insulting Trace Jackson Davis, but so much of what Mike Woodson did in his first 2 seasons was informed by some of these very fundamental decisions that were made for him around roster construction, by the fact that he had an All-American forward in the post. And everything he was doing was built around saying, how do I get the best out of him? How do I build a team that takes his best attributes, brings them out to the full, and then those bleed out onto his teammates and gets the best out of them? And he did that pretty well. Maybe, he'd probably say he could have done it better, but he did it pretty well. He did it well enough to get back to the NCAA tournament, to win 3 tournament games in 2 years, to win 3 Big Ten tournament games in 2 years. Those are all things that if you'd said to me, or I should rephrase, if I'd said to you, the general Indiana fan, on the day Mike Woodson was hired, his first 2 seasons would be NCAA tournament, Big Ten tournament semifinal, Big Ten tournament semifinal, 3 wins in 2 seasons in the NCAA tournament, you'd say, yeah, I'll take that. I'll get it. That sounds like a good start. Needs to go on from there, but that sounds like a good start. But again, across those 2 years, so much of what Woodson has done from a roster standpoint, development standpoint, has been informed by having Trace Jackson Davis. Now he doesn't, and he's got a lot of holes to fill, but he's also got the ability to maybe remake some of it in his own image a little bit more. And I think it's just going to be a fascinating offseason.
And how long before your attention's turned towards Little 500?
It's calls this weekend, man.
Oh, really?
We're going.
Wow. For those of you, Little 500, of course, one of the biggest events in college athletics. Not athletics, but what would you call it? All non-college athletics, but it's hard to it's an event. It's the biggest event at Indiana University. But and how long have you been involved with that? I mean, did you ride in this race when you were in school?
Yes, I did. I rode in the Little 5 for 4 years, from 2006 to 2009, and I've coached for most of the time since in some capacity.
And what team did you coach? Did you coach for?
Yeah, I've coached a couple of different teams. I coached my fraternity team for a number of years, and then I kind of stepped back from that. And then a couple of years later, I stepped into the role I'm in now, which is coaching a different fraternity, Phi Kappa Psi, but it's a friend of mine is their head coach, and he lives in another state. And so he's always just asked me to essentially be a kind of a resource for the guys.
It's looking forward to that, as that means spring. But the NCAA tournament continues to roll on, and we'll be eyeballing that all weekend. Zach, thank you so much. I cannot tell you how much appreciate you.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Zach Osterman from the Indy Star. Make sure you're giving him a follow for complete updated coverage. We've got more coming up here on Indiana Sports Beat Radio, coming to you from the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios here at BB's on this Friday. Back with more right after this.
We'll be right back to the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios for more Indiana Sports Beat Radio with Jim Coyle, presented by Endeavor Hospitality Group and Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington.
If you're looking for a home
Got action tonight, 6:30. Man, there's so many people in the portal.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not in the portal. I'm good, thank you. I might be the only person not in the portal. How about my man, Dusty May?
I know. Good for him.
See, that's what happens when you come on here. Good things happen.
Gosh, imagine, and I know it's the longest of shots, but imagine if he freaking won the whole thing.
Yes, there's the longest of shots.
But honestly, nothing should surprise
Here's what
anybody.
makes me mad.
this
It's going to
year in
end up.
college basketball.
Here's what sucks: the national champion is going to end up being someone like Alabama or Gonzaga, who would in a normal year not win. But Kansas and Arizona and all the top teams have been knocked out.
You can't really eliminate Gonzaga because they do have a lot of the same people they've already had. They just didn't have as good of a regular season as they normally do.
They're not national championship worthy.
Well, if you win the national championship, I'm pretty sure you're national championship.
Well, this is just going to be a different year. Well, look, here's your options, okay? Here are your options to be national champion.
30 seconds.
Gonzaga, UConn, Kansas State, Florida Atlantic, Texas, Xavier, Creighton, Princeton, Houston, or Miami of Florida.
There's really hardly any typical teams in that list that you mentioned, really.
None.
Here we go.
Offered in all Endeavor Hospitality restaurants.
UConn,
Come taste
maybe.
with Dr. Hobbs' Brewing, Metalworks Brewing Company. Bring your passion and your thirst.
This segment is brought to you by K-Bello. Now back to the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios for more Indiana Sports Beat Radio with Jim Coyle, presented by Endeavor Hospitality Group and Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington.
Welcome back, Indiana Sports Beat Radio here on this Friday, getting your weekend started. Hope you had a great week and ready to hit the weekend. NCAA tournament play continues tonight with games between San Diego State, the number 5 seed, as they take on number 1 Alabama. That's an early game at 6:30. Then another number 1 seed, Houston, as they will take on Miami of Florida, the team that beat Indiana. That's where Indiana should be playing right now. So there's that. Then you have later this evening, Princeton and Creighton. That'll be an interesting game. And then the game of the night, number 3 Xavier, number 2 Texas, playing each other. Of the teams that are left, I guess Texas is one that I would put up there, but UConn, Gonzaga, the only 2 names that are left that are names that you normally hear in the race for a national championship. And UConn's been off of it for a while, but look at them, they're back again, going for what would be a 4th national championship. Gonzaga's been trying for their first. This could be the year for Gonzaga because so many people have been knocked out. Their path has been made much easier. But you have Texas and Xavier. Xavier is a team that Indiana went to, played on the road, and won. But yet they're playing to go to a Final Four. Dusty May, who was a manager at Indiana, is playing to go to a Final Four. So very interesting. Tom says, in effect, with the procurement of an additional shooter at the power forward slot, couldn't Indiana have transitioned to a more modern style game this past year? He thinks Davis gets his numbers anyway, but they may have had additional players. That's neither here nor there. Okay, so they already have 4, so it'll be their 5th national championship for UConn. And that's amazing because those have all come in the last 25 years? No team has won 5 national championships in the last 25 years. I mean, that's to look at the span of Duke's. Obviously before that it's UCLA, but man, I can't think of another team that would have done that. That's nuts. And with three different coaches. Did Kevin Ali win one? Did he win their last national championship?
That is correct.
So you have 3 freaking different coaches winning 5 national championships in a somebody, I don't have time to look it up, but when was their first one under Jim Calhoun? And then go to now. That's mind-boggling. I mean, seriously, think about that. Not only that, now you're looking at 3 different periods of college basketball. They're going to do it now in the portal age too. Crazy. I mean,
let's see. Jim Calhoun's first national championship with UConn was 1999.
Okay. So do the math. That's 24 years.
Yeah.
This would be 24 years.
So what is that?
So,
if they were to win, that'd be 5 national titles.
Well, first of all, they've already got 4 in 24, even though when was their last national championship?
Connecticut's last national championship.
Like 8 years ago. 10 years
ago.
ago.
I'm switching around pages. Their last national title, excuse me, 2014. That was with Kevin Ollie.
Okay, so in a 15-year period, they win 4 national championships. Duke might have done that. 4 and 15 right now, and they're going for 5 and 23 or 24. Is that what I said? That would be astounding under 3 different coaches.
So Duke, with Mike Krzyzewski, got 5 national championships in a span, 24 years. Wow, so it would be the exact equivalent, wouldn't it? If they were to get one.
Think of this. UConn is not thought of as Duke. Not even close. But if they win this, they will have been just as successful as Duke, except for they've done it with 3 different coaches in 3 different times of college basketball. That is forever mind-boggling if they would be able to pull this off. And any team that's left is capable of pulling this off. UConn has been playing very well under Bobby Hurley. And there you go. Think of that connection. You got Bobby Hurley coaching they
have Dan Hurley's UConn's coach.
Or Danny Hurley, and then Bobby Hurley played for Duke on 2 of those teams that they won back-to-back national championships. It's crazy. It's nuts, Lee. It's crazy. Let's see. Someone said that UNC has 6. Yeah, they shouldn't count. One of those shouldn't count, but it does. UConn is definitely doing something right. That's nuts. I mean,
it's funny because they can't figure it out in football. They can't figure it out in football.
Dude, if you're winning national championships like that,
I know it doesn't matter, but it's just interesting how they can be so horrifically bad in one.
How many students does UConn have?
That's a good question, actually.
Then you talk about exactly Lee just pointed out. Now talk about the women's side. You want to talk about a powerful program for
University, UConn student enrollment is just over 32,000 students.
Well, so it's not small. Okay, so that's not
How's
a small.
it compared to Indiana University?
Indiana's probably got about 46, I believe.
Yeah, let's take a look.
But they're one of the smaller schools in the Big Ten.
Yeah, close to 46,000.
Compare them to Penn State. Compare them to Wisconsin. Compare them to Ohio State and Michigan. Ohio State, Michigan are like they're 80,000, I think.
Penn State, almost 90,000 students.
Yeah, how nuts is that?
That is insane.
Jason hitting up the Andy Moore Honda hotline says Mike Whitson was probably counting on a healthy Xavier Johnson and Tamar Bates playing like he did over the summer. Still needed more athleticism and shot making pull it off. Yeah, Tamar kind of he became too much of a one-on-one player. It seemed to me. He never seemed like he was in the flow of the offense. Anytime the ball touched his hands, it seems like it reminds me of Troy Williams in essence, without the ability to get to the rim like that. But if he's still wearing an Indiana uniform next year, we'll see how that goes. I'll be honest with you, he's one that I would not be surprised that hits the portal. But anybody that's going to hit the portal for Indiana, I think you're going to see it happen soon. That's why you saw Logan Duncan get in there yesterday. You get in there now and find you a spot. Because the worst thing that can happen is to jump in the portal, give up your place, and not have some place to go. So getting that done sooner or later is what they prefer. John, I think we need to take another break, right?
Yes, sir.
All right, let's get that out of the way so we can finish up a Friday with some fun. You're listening to Indiana Sports Beat Radio, brought to you by the Ugly Grouper. For those of you down around Amelia Island in Florida, Sarasota, or just when you're traveling on vacation, the Ugly Grouper, located on Amelia Island, one of the most well-known places down there and best attended restaurants, owned by a Hoosier. Make sure you stop by and visit. We're back with more right after this.
We'll be right back to the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios for more Indiana Sports Beat Radio with Jim Coyle, presented by Endeavor Hospitality Group and Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington.
With from the half, I got there for the last half. Yeah, I just got into New York.
We missed the first 15 out of 19 shots. It's really good to lay it. They went off for a third.
Terrible.
Got buried.
Oh,
They started out just like Indiana's men team. It was like flat.
it was bad. Bad.
I was just sure they were.
Who?
Houston.
Yes, they did. I think Tennessee lost their point guard, so Miami plays them.
I admire you greatly for your enthusiasm. I
Who?
admire you for your enthusiasm. I couldn't do it. I get too low.
Pro, man, you got to be a pro.
I know you. That's what I say. I admire you. Great. You and Don Fisher. Don always stays positive. You know. Just down a little bit, but he's always professional about it. You have a pick in the Final Four or the championship?
Shit, are you kidding me?
It's a crapshoot.
Yeah. It's like I said, it's going to be the year for one of the odd teams. No, it's going to be like for Gonzaga, or even though they're not good enough.
All right, here we go.
Stone with their love of Southern eateries. With quality, local, and organic food as their main focus, Southern Stone strives to always provide their guests with an exceptional dining experience. With weekly specials, quick, attentive service, Southern Stone Restaurant provides delicious, 5-star comfort food with a Southern charm at 2-star prices. Southern Stone Restaurant is part of Endeavor Hospitality's Wow Club.
This segment is brought to you by Bubba's 33 in Clarksville. Pizza, burgers, beer. Now back to the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios for more Indiana Sports Beat Radio with Jim Coyle, presented by Endeavor Hospitality Group and Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington.
Welcome back, Indiana Sports Beat Radio here on this Friday. I hope you had a great week, ready for the weekend. Well, trying to get you started. How about a little sweetness here?
Oh, look at that! How'd you pull that up?
For those listening on radio, I know you can't see that, but I pulled up this picture of John and his beautiful wife celebrating their how many years? 3 years.
Third anniversary was this past Tuesday,
and then our second anniversary was
the day after that.
So that's the only reason you remember one or the other.
Exactly. They coincide with one another.
But you're not going to admit which one you remember on the air, I can promise you.
Yeah, we went to a prestigious steakhouse that we had a gift card for down here in Louisville. I'm sure you know which one I'm talking about.
Jeff Ruby's?
No, actually not Jeff Ruby's.
You can say it.
Okay, I didn't know if you. I know you kind of have a thing with saying competitors, but yeah,
What?
Ruth Chris.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I went to Ruth Chris. I've never been there before. Got me a nice New York strip. She got herself a couple of petite filet mignons with some shrimp, and it was good. Some good stuff.
Very nice. That's down there in Louisville. It's cool because it sits up. It's called the Caden Towers, but it sits up high on the top floor. Probably, I don't know. It's 15 floors up, I'd say, right?
Yeah, we were on the 16th floor, I think, is as high
16,
as it goes.
16. Yeah, very, very cool overlooking things. Not very far from the headquarters for Texas Roadhouse, which is also Bubba's 33.
That's right. It is very close to there.
Of course, a lot of food headquarters based in Louisville. It's amazing. You've got Texas Roadhouse / Bubba's 33. You've got Yum Brands, which is Kentucky Fried Chicken, Pizza Hut, and Taco Bell. You've got Papa John's. Who am I
two
missing?
major pizza chains right there.
Yeah, who am I missing?
Who else is? I'm trying to think. I mean, the other ones are just local, regional chains, but is what came to mind. My mind was Moby Dick, and if you're not from the Southern Indiana, Louisville area, you're not going to know what Moby Dick is.
Cheap, fresh fried food. All right, picks. How about some picks for tonight? Who's picking what? Who?
I'll pull up some picks.
Well, I already got them laid out.
I'm already calling it, and I'm sure you are too. Miami's going to beat Houston tonight.
Yeah, what is the line on that?
Let's take a look.
I need to pull up some.
7.5 for Houston.
They're getting 7.5.
They are.
Oh man, I would take Miami at 7.5.
I think I would too.
And maybe I will tonight. I haven't. Last night was the first night I actually got to sit down and watch ball games, just watch them, and they were awesome. It was a great night to watch. I mean, those games were really good. Okay, so San Diego State, Alabama.
Alabama's 7.5-point favorite. I think they'll roll. I think they'll cover that spread.
Okay, see, I can't believe it. That's the same spread. That's amazing.
That game taking place down in the KFC Center.
I would take Alabama in that one. Next up, we've got Princeton and Creighton.
Creighton 9.5-point favorites in that one. I don't know. It's hard to judge Princeton because, I mean, I don't really know what to expect. They've already beaten Arizona and, who was their round of 32 match?
I'm taking Princeton just to cover.
Princeton to cover? Yeah.
Taking Princeton to cover. Then the game of the night, Xavier and Texas. This should be a hell of a game. It's wow. Lee says Texas is up 4.5, plus 4.5.
Texas is the favorite by 4. Yes. That's tough. I'm going to take Xavier in this.
I'm taking Texas.
Not even just to cover. I'm taking Xavier money line.
Yeah, I hate to give up the 4 points, but I just think the story you've got an interim coach, by the way, coaching Texas. He's the interim coach.
And what's crazy is that he's benefiting from the fact that he's using Chris Beard's roster. Obviously, whenever he was a head coach at UTEP,
wait a minute.
He was a terrible head coach at UTEP. If he gets to the Final Four with Chris Beard's roster, obviously he'll get the Texas job. You think he would, and he'll get it at a very cheap. He'll be a
now
cheap
you
buy.
say Chris Beard's roster, but how much of this roster did Chris Beard construct? Wasn't he in his first season at Texas?
That's a good question. It could be mostly Shaka. I think it's his second. It's his second season because Tamar Bates was originally committed to Texas back when Shaka Smart was head coach 2 years ago.
Five Lefts believes that Texas is going to blow Xavier out.
We'll see.
Jim Harbaugh says, cheese on Eastern Boulevard in Clarksville back in the day. Oh, yeah. That was a long time ago. I'm not sure what they're talking. Sometimes they get in conversations on the.
Well, they were mentioning restaurants that they thought are from the Louisville area. I don't think the Ponderosas was from
God.
Louisville, was it?
Those are some bad ones, people. He said he went to a nice restaurant. You can't throw out Ponderosa and no offense, but Sizzler, gee whiz.
Ponderosa may be the lowest rated steak chain.
Are they still around?
The one close to my house closed down a couple years ago because a vehicle crashed into it and they couldn't pay for the repairs. The restaurant couldn't pay for the repairs, so they closed down.
Oh, mercy. So no Pitts. Penn State looking at Texas, coach.
I can see Rodney Terry. That'd be a very good get. Maybe not a good get, but it'd be a get I can see Penn State going after.
I can say you can look all you want. There ain't no way if that guy has to go to Penn State. Penn State is a death job. It's a tombstone, man.
Evident, other than for Micah Shrewsbury.
Well, it's still. Why do you think he left?
Yeah,
he couldn't wait to get the hell out of there for a program that is not going to offer him NIL help. That it's not. I don't know that Notre Dame was just a lifeline for him to hopefully move on to someplace else. But he went out there quickest. Dusty May
to Texas if the Texas job stays open.
They're not going to not hire the interim coach.
I seriously don't think he should be the next head coach. Even unless, I guess if he gets to a Final Four, maybe. Even if he definitely if he wins a national title, you can't argue against that.
But speaking of Dusty May, there are other jobs open and will be other jobs open. And Does he land someplace else? He is in Boca Raton, Florida. Don't forget that. So, yeah, Penn State's a Big Ten job. But do you go from Boca Raton, Florida to College Station College Station?
Who knows? 1 minute.
Hang on, what's called there in Pennsylvania? State College.
It's called three named. It's University Park, State College, and Happy Valley. I don't know what the hell the difference is.
Yeah, I can tell you one thing. As a basketball coach, it's not happy, but I know we're about out of time. What a great, fun week. We've got more when we come back next week as the NCAA tournament continues. We'll have everybody, Don Fisher, back on Monday, so look forward to that. Looking forward to the games this weekend. I'm going to make my picks, man. I already have. I've picked everything. Let's see how I do. Alabama, Miami, Texas, Princeton, all in the spreads. Big thanks to Alec, Lasley, Zach Osterman, John, the producer. Most importantly, thanks to you guys. Thanks for Lee to coming out today. And thanks for you guys. Like I said, without you, there's no point to us being here. We love you. We appreciate you. And look forward to talking to you again on Monday. For those of you up in a region rats, go out and have yourselves a great time. Whether you're over in Fort Wayne, down in Evansville, Southern Indiana, Bloomington, Indianapolis, Chicago, wherever you are, have a great weekend. We love you and appreciate you. Until then, I'm Jim Coyle. I will see you on the radio.
Thanks for listening to Indiana Sports Beat Radio. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube page for more clips and team coverage of Indiana basketball, football, and more. You can also find full episodes and tons of other content on thehoosier.com. We'll see you next time for another edition of Indiana Sports Beat Radio.